There was very little in my soldier file about Richard as a person. The largest document in his file was actually his medical records. And after everything that he suffered, one doctor wrote about him that he remained quite rational and in good spirits. And that completely changed how I looked at everything else that was in the file. He got into trouble a lot. But even at the worst of times, he was remaining in good spirits. So it changed the way that I looked at all of the trouble that he was perhaps getting into, and made me think that maybe what he was doing was to keep spirits high, like chasing his friends and throwing baguettes at them or something, because he was never really in serious trouble, but he was in trouble a lot. So with that in mind is how I kind of interpreted his story. So Richard Vernon Taylor was born June 14th, 1918 in Ottawa, Ontario. He was single and living in Westboro with his parents when he enlisted in the Canadian Army on July 20th, 1941. His father, Richard Taylor Sr., was a great war veteran, and his mother, Alice Taylor, worked in the War Records Office during the Second World War. Richard was previously in the reserves and worked as a civil service clerk prior to enlistment. After joining the Canadian Forces, he was relocated to Sussex, New Brunswick with the 1st Battalion of the Governor-General's Foot Guard. So his military movements, like I just said, in September of 1941, after a few months after enlisting, Richard Taylor was sent to Sussex, where he would be joining the whole Canadian Corps, consisting of 3 infantry divisions, the Army Tank Brigade, large number of ancillary troops that were to be concentrated there before the end of the year. A few months later, Taylor was sent to Debert, Nova Scotia, which is near Truro, where a large newer camp had been built in 1940. Here he trained until September, when he and the rest of the 21st Armoured Regiment of the Governor-General's Foot Guards embarked for the UK. In preparation for his overseas deployment, Taylor wrote his final will and testament, leaving everything to his mother, Alice. From September 1942 until March 1944, Taylor trained with the 3rd Canadian Army Corps reinforcements in the UK. During this time, Taylor was charged under the Army Act Section 15, subsection 1, which is absence himself without leave, a couple times, and Section 40, which is guilty of any act, conduct, disorder, or neglect to the prejudice of good order and military discipline. He was never found guilty of the first charges of AWOL, so that makes me think he was only gone long enough to get up to something silly, but never actually gone. But he was charged under Section 40 a couple of times. His longest sentence was 50 days in the detention barracks, and he also forfeited 90 days pay for whatever he did. But he was granted a 15-day remission of this long sentence in December of 1943. And shortly after, he was awarded the Canadian Volunteer Service Medal and Clasp, which is granted to persons of any rank in the Naval, Military, or Air Force of Canada who voluntarily served on the active service and honorably completed 18 months of service between September of 1939 and March of 1947. In April of 1944, Taylor passed the Gunner Operator's Qualification Test with a mark of 75%. From this point onward, in his records, his rank is classified as a trooper in the 10th Armoured Regiment, as he was previously ranked as a guardsman in the Governor-General's Foot Guard. Taylor was on the X4 list of reinforcements that disembarked in France on July 3, 1944. The 10th Armoured Regiment, the Fort Garry Horses, had been providing tank support on the beaches of Normandy since the 6th of June, 1944. In the second phase of the Normandy invasion, the reserve battalion, Le Régiment de la Chaudière, were to land and pass through the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada, which was the primary reserve group. They were to avoid becoming involved in the mopping up of the beach defences in order to carry out their proper role, which was to capture 3 battery positions approximately 3 miles inland near Bagnes-sur-Mer. This was led by the tanks of the 10th Armoured Regiment, which was Taylor's regiment. 2 squadrons from the regiment were equipped with swimming tanks. Landing 5 minutes before H hour, they engaged beach defences and assisted the infantry and engineers during the most critical stages of the assault. This was the only Canadian assault battalion front where tank support was reported as ineffective in the war diaries. The 10th Armoured Regiment itself recorded that the Queen's Own Rifles suffered severely before B Squadron could support it. Le Régiment de la Chaudière recorded that it spent 2 hours in the assembly area before pushing towards Bagnes-sur-Mer, where they would again be supported by the A Squadron of the 10th Armoured Regiment. I included both of those because I don't know if he was part of the B Squadron or A Squadron. By mid-afternoon, the 3 battery positions were captured. After taking these positions, they were to move southeast to capture Basly in preparation for the succeeding phase. At the beginning of July 1944, there was a momentary pause in the operations in Normandy. At this point, the Germans still held Caen, but they had been forced to abandon any plans of mounting a major counteroffensive to destroy Allied bridgehead. As a preliminary to attacking Caen itself, the 1st British Corps ordered the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division to capture R.C.A.C, which we just drove through, or past, an adjoining airfield as part of Operation Windsor. The attack was delivered in the morning of July 4th, the day after Taylor was taken on strength and disembarked in France. By the 8th Infantry Brigade, the Royal Winnipeg Rifles and the 10th Armoured Regiment. Taylor's unit involved in R.C.A.C suffered 20 casualties, of which 8 were fatal. By 11:15 a.m. on July 9th, the Canadian front had successfully completed the occupation of R.C.A.C airfield, and shortly after the city of Caen was liberated. The final phase for the battle for the city had been difficult, and the total Canadian casualties for the 2 days were 1,194, of which 330 were fatal. Taylor was taken on and struck off strength several times in July and early August of 1944. He would be taken on for the last time on August 13th, 1944 as part of Operation Tractable. His regiment was to provide tank support for the Royal Winnipeg Rifles in their mission to take Point 184 and gain access to Route 158, which is the highway we were just driving on, with the ultimate goal of making it to Falaise. In preparations for this mission, General Carrère sent a message to all commanders and commanding officers that said, "Hit him first, hit him hard, and keep on hitting him. We can contribute in major degree to speedy Allied victory by our actions today." When Richard Vernon Taylor enlisted, he had a clean bill of health, having only had his tonsils removed at age 16. While he was in Debert, Nova Scotia, Taylor injured his foot. He spent roughly 3 weeks in the hospital in Debert while this healed. Upon returning, he was confined to barracks for 10 days and issued an extra hour for drills daily. There would be no additions to his medical records until August 15, 1944. While executing Operation Tractable, Taylor was severely wounded. He suffered a bilateral traumatic amputation of his arms, just below the elbows. He received a bullet to his left abdomen, rib, and back. A piece of shrapnel destroyed his left eye and was lodged in his nasal cavity. Taylor was treated immediately at the field hospital. Here the bullet was removed and his arms bandaged. Injuries to his head were cleaned, but the shrapnel was left until he was moved to the nearest hospital. Here he would also undergo surgery on both arms in an attempt to clean up the ends and save what was left of his limbs. It is after going through all of this that a doctor wrote on his records, "He was restless on admission, but quite rational. Remains in good spirits. Condition is improving." Richard Vernon Taylor would die of his wounds 2 days later in hospital. He was 26 years old. Just to end, I have one more thing. So I couldn't find much about him as a person, like I said, other than that one little blip about his personality. But I was able to find a fun story about his mom's, and if we're friends now, I have identified with his little rascal personality that I have developed for him, and so if you were to visit me, I would want someone to come and tell stories about me or my loved ones. So, it's not sad, that was just a moment for me. So, his mother, Alice Taylor, who he obviously loved very much because he left everything to this woman in his will. A little something about his mom. She took up bowling when she was 86 years old. She had never missed the merry-go-round at the Ottawa exhibition. She passed away on October 12th of 99, just 2 weeks before her 102nd birthday. She had endured the loss of her son for 55 years and her husband, who was also a veteran of the First World War, for 22 years. But what I really want to share with you is something that Wendy Barn, who was a member of the Ottawa Council, shared about her. So it's just about her courage and her indomitable spirit, it says. 3 years ago, so 3 years prior to her death, she would have been 98, almost 99. Her reaction 3 years ago to the attempted robbery of her purse in the courtyard outside her home. When some thugs grabbed her purse and ran off, she gave chase and got her purse back. When the police reprimanded her for her dangerous actions, she firmly told them that it contained the silver cross that was given to her in memory of her son, and she was not going to let that go.